folk who are now learning for the first time about
Mhm.
Napoleon Dilemma know what that is?
Yeah, so it was a book published in 1944. It was completed in 1942. In the late 1930s, Carnegie Corporation of New York, and I'm going to put a parenthesis to that. Carnegie Corporation of New York is not a foundation established by steel titan Andrew Carnegie. In 1911. And it was started to fund projects in the US, ultimately also Canada and the British colonies. And part of their funding, they fund knowledge production, was a study. This was commissioned by one of its presidents in the 1920s, who wanted a comprehensive study in the social sciences on Black Americans. And Greg, I'm sure we'll talk about the purpose of the study ultimately. But the way the project is remembered, published in 1944, is its association with Brown v. Board of Education, the U.S. Supreme Court decision in 1954 that found state-sanctioned racially segregated public schools to be unconstitutional, to go against the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution. So from many circles, and we'll talk about like
Welcome back to the Black Table. I'm Greg Carr, your host, and this week we will continue in our ongoing dialogue aimed at building community, aimed at helping us better understand the issues that face us in contemporary society and connecting scholarship, connecting thinking work to problem solving as we work collectively. To Today, I'm very excited. We're going to have a conversation that really talks about how extreme wealth influences public policy, social policy, and more specifically, how the history of philanthropy in tandem with government over the arc of the last century or so have shaped the way that white supremacy, white nationalism, or white internationalism has maintained itself, often with the help of academics and scholars. All of this, of course, we're doing to examine how to dismantle those systems and create something better, something new, something that will help us in our common humanity. So we're going to ask some questions today. How have scholars contributed to these oppressive systems? How has philanthropy and extreme wealth recruited scholars to help them maintain these systems of oppression? And we're going to do all that and more with Dr. Maribel Mori, who is the director of the Miami Institute for the Social Sciences. She has written a remarkable new book, White Philanthropy. And if you don't have it, you should go get it immediately. White Philanthropy, Carnegie Corporation's An American Dilemma and the Making of a White World Order. She has a PhD from Princeton, a JD from New York University School of Law, started out at Notre Dame, and a lot of other academic credentials. She was, before she started the Institute, a professor at Clemson University. She's worked at a number of schools, including overseas, Stockholm, Sweden. But most importantly, she has marshaled her considerable gifts and talents to independent institution building. We're going to hear about how her journey has led her to where she is right now. Professor Maribel Mori, so wonderful to have you here at the table.
It's amazing. Thank you, Dr. Carr, for this invitation.
No, Greg, please. Otherwise, I'm gonna call you Dr. Maury, and then we just.
Okay.
No, I'm just saying. Look, one of the beautiful things, y'all, is we dropping all pretension.
Yeah, no, I like it.
Well, I mean, you've guided us in that. I mean, so we absolutely want to enter this conversation. I'm going to resist the urge and say at the onset that we want to have you back. We can't wait to have you back because I'm wondering what you think. Being a Notre Dame grad, I don't know if you've seen this new article in the New Yorker about Amy Comey Barrett. I'm like, I want to ask her about that, but I'm going to resist the urge and get right to the business. This book, White Philanthropy, fills a gap that I think those of us who work in fields like Africana studies, think about decolonial studies, probably knew needed to be filled. But until reading this book, really what you lay out is a roadmap for how we should think about this question of extreme wealth and its relationship to oppression. Because say a little bit about what led you to write White Philanthropy.
Okay. So my interest in American Dilemma goes back to my undergraduate years at Notre Dame. So before I went to NYU and before Princeton, the PhD. And so back in the day, I was trying to make sense of my full identity as a Latina woman. And so I was very interested in the race-sex analogy. I was still separating my identities before I knew about intersectionality, which I was more exposed to in law school through critical race theory. So at the time, I was studying in Paris, and I was exposed to Simone de Beauvoir's work, and I realized that in writing The Second Sex, she had relied on
The practice you are about to learn is almost never described publicly.
I hope you find it useful as well. One of will be exceptions, of course, but she's talking in the general about how things have typically been going, and she's looking back